Forget everything you think you know about Portugal. Yes, it has dramatic ocean cliffs that look like the edge of the earth and quiet ancient towns untouched by time. But this country is changing fast, rapidly becoming one of the most in-demand destinations on the planet. Here is the harsh truth that those aesthetic travel videos refuse to tell you. The secret is out. Some places are getting incredibly crowded, and prices are noticeably climbing. The real magic of Portugal doesn't just exist anymore. It depends entirely on how you choose to experience it. So, in this video, you aren't getting another generic recycled list of tourist traps. You are getting a real, unfiltered journey through Portugal, exactly as it feels right now. By the end, you will know exactly where to go, what to avoid, and how to experience this country the right way. Let's start with a place that genuinely feels like stepping thousands of years into the past. Évora is not loud, it is not flashy, and that is exactly why it stands out in today's fast-paced travel world. As you walk through its remarkably quiet streets, you start to notice something highly unusual. There are massive Roman ruins sitting right in the middle of the city, as if time simply stopped moving here centuries ago. The Temple of Diana rises directly between simple, whitewashed houses. It creates this strange, beautiful contrast between ancient imperial power and peaceful daily life. Right now, as big capital cities like Lisbon become packed with weekend visitors, places like Évora are becoming exponentially more valuable. They offer space, silence, and a level of authenticity that is getting harder to find. You can actually sit in a small cobblestone square, hear nothing but footsteps and distant local conversations, and feel genuinely connected to the place instead of just passing through it. From that deep, quiet stillness, we are moving to one of the most powerful natural forces in all of Europe. Nazaré is not just another coastal beach town, it is a place where the ocean demonstrates its absolute raw strength. Standing on the cliffs up above Praia do Norte, you look down and quickly realize the waves here are not normal. They are massive, shifting walls of water. They are created by a deep, underwater canyon that acts like a funnel, pushing the ocean upward with terrifying, incredible force. During the winter months, at the best, surfers from around the globe come here to chase down some of the biggest waves ever recorded in human history. Watching them from the cliffside feels almost unreal, like watching a movie. But what makes Nazaré truly unique is the extreme contrast. Because on most normal days, it feels surprisingly calm and welcoming. You have wide stretches of golden sand, incredibly fresh seafood caught that morning, and a very relaxed coastal lifestyle. It is a place that can feel deeply peaceful in the morning and dangerously extreme by the afternoon. That dual personality is exactly what makes it unforgettable. Now imagine leaving the brutal force of the ocean behind and entering a place that feels like a perfectly preserved storybook. Abados is one of those incredibly rare towns that looks exactly the way you imagine a medieval village should look in your head. The entire town is completely surrounded by high, fortified stone walls, and you can actually walk along the very top of them, looking out over the rolling green countryside. Inside those walls, the streets are narrow, tight, and lined with bright white houses heavily decorated with vibrant flowers. It creates a setting that feels almost too perfect to be real. The problem is, most people only visit for a very short time during the middle of the day. But the real experience, the authentic magic, begins when the tour buses leave and the town finally becomes quiet again. At night, with only soft, warm streetlights and entirely empty streets, an Abados transforms into something much more personal and atmospheric. From a small town completely frozen in time, we move into a city that feels alive in every possible way. Porto has a completely different energy than the rest of the country, and you can feel it the absolute second you arrive. The tall buildings leaning along the Douro River are brightly colored, but noticeably worn and weathered. This gives the entire city a raw, unpolished, and authentic character that is really hard to find in more sanitized European destinations. As you walk through the historic Ribera district, you constantly hear live music, deep conversations, and the continuous sound of the river flowing right beside you. It creates a rhythm that feels completely natural and unforced. Directly across the river, the dark wine cellars of Vila Nova de Gaia remind you that this city is deeply connected to its agricultural traditions, especially through its world-famous port wine. Even though tourism is undeniably growing quickly here, Porto still feels real. It feels lived in, and that gritty authenticity is exactly what makes people fall deeply in love with it. Leaving the busy city behind, the landscape begins to dramatically change into something much more peaceful and expansive. The Douro Valley stretches out endlessly with massive rolling hills, completely covered in steep terraced vineyards. These ancient vines perfectly follow the natural curves of the river in sharp, precise lines. This is literally one of the oldest demarcated wine regions in the entire world. But amazingly, it does not feel overly crowded or overly commercialized. Instead, it feels incredibly slow, profoundly quiet, and deeply connected to nature. Traveling through this immense valley, whether you are driving winding roads, taking the historic train, or floating on a boat, becomes less about reaching a specific destination. It becomes entirely about enjoying the slow process of the journey itself. In a modern era, when fast travel and quick photos are everywhere, this kind of slow, deliberate experience is becoming more valuable than ever. From the deep calm of the river valley, we are moving far out into the Atlantic Ocean, where the scenery becomes significantly more dramatic and unpredictable. Madeira feels like a geographic anomaly, a place that simply should not exist. You have incredibly steep, sharp cliffs rising directly from the violent ocean, and thick clouds constantly drifting through the high, jagged mountains. The island offers this perfect, intense mix of adventure and deep relaxation. You can spend the day hiking along narrow, ancient irrigation paths called levadas. You can explore hidden, rushing waterfalls deep in the forest, and then easily return to a warm coastal town for a quiet, comfortable evening by the sea. In recent years, Madeira has become increasingly popular. It is especially popular among long-term travelers and digital nomads looking for raw nature. Yet, despite that rapid recent growth, it still feels incredibly wild and untouched in many of its central areas. That feeling of true wilderness is becoming exceedingly rare in Europe. If Madeira feels like a lush, dramatic dream, then the Azores feel even more distant, remote, and untouched. Located incredibly far out in the middle of the Atlantic, this isolated group of volcanic islands offers landscapes that feel raw and natural in a way that is genuinely difficult to describe. You will find massive, deep crater lakes completely surrounded by vibrant green hills. You will discover steaming, natural hot springs hidden deep inside dense, dark forests, and an ocean that is absolutely teeming with massive marine life, like whales and dolphins. This is absolutely not a place for rushing through a checklist of tourist attractions. It is a place for forcibly slowing down and experiencing wild nature strictly on its own terms. As mainstream tourism continues to grow rapidly on the Portuguese mainland, destinations like the Azores are becoming increasingly important. They offer vital space, pure air, and a sense of absolute balance. Now, we must return to the mainland for what is easily one of the most iconic and photographed coastlines in all of Europe. The Algarve is globally known for its towering golden cliffs, crystal-clear blue water, and hidden eroded sea caves. It features some of the most striking coastal landscapes in Portugal. Specific places like the famous Benagil Cave and the dramatic beaches around Lagos have become extremely highly popular, especially during the absolute peak summer months. This means that your timing is literally everything here. because visiting early in the crisp morning or strictly during the off-season winter months can completely, fundamentally change your entire experience. When the heavy summer crowds are finally gone, the Algarve feels deeply peaceful and almost surreal. You are left with nothing but the echoing sound of crashing waves bouncing between the massive sandstone cliffs. As we move back up the coast, closer to Lisbon, the atmosphere begins to shift yet again. It turns into something much more magical and intentionally dramatic. Sintra sits high up among dense forested hills. It feels exactly like a place taken directly from the pages of a fantasy storybook. Brightly colored, eccentric palaces rise sharply above the dark tree canopy. The most famous, the Pena Palace, stands out aggressively with its bold primary colors and incredible sweeping views of the surrounding land. However, Sintra is also undeniably one of the absolute busiest places in all of Portugal. And visiting at the wrong time of day can feel completely overwhelming and stressful. The vital key here is to arrive before anyone else or stay much later than the tour buses. You want to be there when the sunlight changes color and the massive crowds finally begin to disappear down the mountain. In those rare, quieter twilight moments, Sintra becomes something completely different. It turns into a place that feels deeply mysterious, strangely calm, and almost unreal. Finally, we arrive at our last stop in Lisbon, a massive city that somehow brings all these different elements together. Built steeply across 7 hills overlooking the wide Tagus River, Lisbon effortlessly combines deep history, vibrant culture, and modern energy. It does it in a way that feels highly dynamic and constantly evolving. Walking through incredibly old, winding neighborhoods like Alfama, you hear traditional, mournful fado music drifting slowly through the narrow streets. Meanwhile, bright yellow vintage trams move slowly past crumbling old buildings, entirely covered in beautiful, intricate tiles. At the exact same time, trendy new cafes, innovative restaurants, and modern creative workspaces are rapidly shaping the city. They are turning it into one of Europe's most exciting and sought-after destinations. Lisbon is unquestionably more crowded today than it has ever been, and the prices have noticeably, drastically increased for both locals and visitors. But it still consistently offers quiet moments that feel deeply personal if you actually take the time to explore beyond the main, obvious attractions. You can still easily find quiet, tucked-away viewpoints, empty hidden streets, and small, beautiful details that make the entire city feel like your own personal discovery. Portugal is absolutely no longer a well-kept secret, and that reality is both its biggest strength and its biggest current challenge. The staggering beauty is definitely still here. The rich culture is still incredibly strong, and the dramatic landscapes are still completely unforgettable. But the actual quality of your experience now depends entirely on how you choose to travel. It depends on exactly when you go, and it depends on how deeply you are actually willing to explore beyond the surface. If you are willing to move beyond the obvious spots and truly take your time, Portugal can and will still surprise you in ways you did not expect. And those unexpected, authentic moments are the ones that will stay with you long after the trip is finally over.